Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business. I am your host, Catryn Becker. In this podcast, we talk about all sorts of things related to business and all different people because we can learn from one another and realize that we're not actually alone on this journey. I am my great honor to have Brandi Jo Newman on the show today. She is a champion of all things, but mostly financial literacy. So we're so great to have her on the show and to learn more about that and what we can do to better ourselves in that arena. So Brandi Jo, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I love
Happy
that
to be here.
rhymes.
Yeah.
Right before we started recording, I asked Brandi Jo if it was Brandi or Brandi Jo, and she said it was very much Brandi Jo. So for all of those listening, that's how we do it down in Texas.
There you go. Yeehaw.
So Brandi Jo, I would love to know a little bit more about your background and how you got into the space of financial literacy before we kind of dive into the questions.
I was playing golf with a couple of VPs from a securities firm in Scottsdale, Arizona in 1996. And they said, "You're really great with people. Will you come work with us?" And I said, "Well, what would I be doing?" And they said, "We want you to play golf with our top clients." Done. I can do that. I was on what was then called the Futures Tour, which is now the Epson Tour, which is kind of AAA for ladies professional golf. And my family background was in banking, oil and gas, cattle, real estate, timber, aggregate. And so I was very comfortable around money. I was very comfortable around rich, wealthy people, even if they were, not very nice. So I came on board and we did a big marketing campaign, and that's what started my career. I was already an investor at 14, 15, 16. And then that's when it started. It started in 1996, and 27 years later, here we are.
And it's interesting, saying how you mentioned, being very comfortable around money, because that's not the norm for most people. But yet the lack of financial literacy is something that most everyone struggles with. It's not taught in schools. Not that anyone balances a checkbook these days, but that's a, very classic example of all of a sudden, you're thrown into the world and you've spent all this time and energy in learning a skill to make money. And then once you make money, we've never been taught any skills on how to manage our money. How do you think that varies between, let's just say, the classes?
Well, socioeconomic background, however you want to chop up the different groups and cohorts and that kind of thing. I think it all has to do with what is the point of having money, and why is there a disparity between socioeconomic classes. And I think it's the way that we value money, and we also value ourselves. And the interesting part is, one group of people will be given money and they cannot retain it. They will find a way to lose it. And then another group will earn money, and they will take that earned money and then they will leverage it, and then they will create more money, which is equal to wealth. And my big thing is that it's always the behaviors of how you treat money or how you value money. I was always taught that money is a way of keeping score, and that was actually detrimental to my relationship with money. And I think money should flow, and I think we should not hoard it and separate it from ourselves. I think we should use it to create opportunity, not only for ourselves, but in our community, and also to leverage up. My big thing is leverage. My big thing is not separating yourself from your money, but being able to use it. And when I say separating yourself from your money, getting into tax deferred plans and, putting money away for later, I think money should be used now. The biggest issue that I see with people is that they judge people with money, or then the opposite is true. They judge people without money. And money is just a tool to live your life. And some people use it better than others.
Well, and that's well said. And I think what's so interesting and what came up for me as you were speaking is there anything else that we have the same complicated relationship with that we do with money?
Our parents.
And one may argue they are connected for sure. I
Yeah.
think a lot of times how we think of money is a direct reflection of how we were raised.
Yeah. Um,
Well,
but it
and
is complicated. And I think the financial services industry, and I had a conversation with a gentleman last week about how the financial services industry has kept people dumb.
Hmm.
And they have, and I'm one of them. And, 27 years ago, when I first started in this business, it was basically just a big trick. And we used very complex language, in-house jargon. And it's a way to charge more. And we, I think the, and I shouldn't say, well, I should say average. I just think the ordinary, everyday, hardworking American, no matter what they're doing, whether they're entrepreneurial or whether they're, earning a paycheck, and there's a whole spectrum of those people, is that they need to have ownership and they need to have skin in the game. They need to be in they need to be in a good relationship with their money and not be afraid of it, and look at it every day and appreciate it every day and see where they can actually deploy their money, their capital, into other opportunities. And most of the time people are just fearful, risk averse, and that's why they really don't maximize their wealth to
well, absolutely. And I think, the phrase that money is the root of all evil is such a pervasive phrase. And if you grow up hearing that, I mean, it's no wonder we have a complicated relationship.
yeah.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And what can someone do in order to change their money mindset?
Well, they can work with me, number one. There's several books out there that give people great ideas, and how they can equate it to their own relationship with money is, going back to what I said, money is just a way to keep score. The more value that you put out into the world, the more wealth you will achieve. And sometimes it drips in quite efficiently and on a consistent basis. And other times it just comes in big chunks. Mine comes in big chunks. And I'm just wanting to share my insight and share the value
Absolutely.
that I have. And some people don't want to fix it. And I have this, can I cuss on the podcast?
I mean, I'd prefer if you didn't because it's more
Okay.
editing work.
Just asking. Don't ask, don't get. This is your show. This is not mine. Everybody has issues and everybody has suffered trauma, whether it was physical, mental, emotional, or whatever, or whether it was even on purpose. It can be even in the way that we're born that incites that trauma, that injects that trauma and imprints on our brain. The whole point of the matter is that when we actually do get a fully developed brainstem and we actually start getting out into the real world, you can actually use the context to say, wait a minute, my relationship with money is not the best and I want more. It just so happens that only about 5% of the world really wants to give more, get more, and share more. And so I think that's the reason that money is, that the use of money and the lack of money is so pervasive, is because there's not a lot of people on the planet that look to money as a good thing.
Absolutely right. One of the exercises I do with my coaching clients is they don't have any time to think. And I just say, okay, you've got $5,000, spend it. And they have, 30 seconds to write down what they would spend it on. It doesn't have to be in one chunk. It can be in whatever way they want. It can be for anything. And then I say, okay, great. Now you've got $50,000. You have 30 seconds, spend it. And they have to write down all the things. And we keep stepping it up until we get to 5 million. And what I've seen over doing this with so many different people is that the first time when they're spending the 5,000, the 50,000, it's usually on personal things. Like the 5,000 is almost always spent to go on a trip. There's always a vacation. And then when we get to the 50,000, 100,000, 500,000, or just 50,000 and 100,000, that's really where they're knocking down debt. That's when they start thinking about that. And then when we get to between the 100,000 and the 500,000, people start using it for investments, is when they start thinking about it. They start thinking like, okay, I'm going to invest in this for my business or this. When we get into the 5 million and they've already felt like all of their needs have been met, then they start thinking of more philanthropic endeavors like, oh, I've always wanted to start this charity, or, oh, I always wanted to support this cause. And I find that so interesting in psychology that it's almost like the hierarchy of needs, right? Like they have to take care of themselves first, then they start thinking about the future, and then they start thinking about the others. But I wonder from your perspective if you've seen anything similar to that, or if you had a different experience with your clients.
Yeah. It's quite prevalent when they get, see, I call those 5, 10, 50. To me, the 5 and the 10, those are little chunks. And I'm not going to look at that as any kind of money that I can enjoy. I'm going to use that to reinvest in my business. When you get to the 50s, it's like, okay, who can I hire? So, and I've done all the work with money and therapy and all that kind of stuff. But the biggest, when I start asking my questions, when I'm going through my assessment with my potential clients, they don't think they have enough money to do much with. So not very many of them tithe. I think that's a big deal. I think that's, and I believe in the woo-woo and manifesting and, thoughts become things, that kind of I'm of that mindset that we've got to put stuff out and to get good stuff back. And it's not very many people are philanthropic. They're not charitable when I first get my hands on them. And they're not associating, they're associating taxes with a disincentive. Am I saying that right? They're not incentivized to make more money because they think that therefore they're going to pay more taxes. And it's like, well, you got to own a business because the IRS tax code was written for business owners. Donald Trump said it best. The system is built for business owners. So therefore, I think everyone should own some sort of business so they can get tax advantage. But they look at taxes as, well, I don't want to make too much money because I don't want to pay taxes. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So we have to go through some exercises that are, that change their mindset, basically, that change their perspective on money and taxes and capital and wealth and getting to where they really want to go.
I 100% absolutely agree with you on that. And I hear stories all the time of the silly things that people do. And then it's like, but if you had just done it a little differently, you'd be better off as a whole.
And I think it's because most people, again, I'm a huge networker. You're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with when you walk into a room. You're the average of everybody in the room, that kind of thing. And so when you grow up, you hear the same thing all the time about this. You hear the same thing about the same things. And then when you go to college, you hear the same things about the same things. They may be different things, but you hear the same thing about the same things. And then when you get a job or you run a business or you start employing people, there's not a lot of expansion in learning, because it's just, I just need a job. I need to support my family. I need to, grow a family. I need to make sure that we're all secure. And so people don't hear different things. And so, I'm the nonconformist alternative. I am radical compared to the traditional financial services industry. And, you know, people are, people take what they have learned from their family, and then they try to get to where they have, they have these dreams and these desires and these visions, but they don't know how to get there mechanically with money. And so that's where I come in. And I make them feel okay about, doing something radically different than what they've been taught.
No, I think it's great. I'm curious on, you mentioned your history in golf, and I recently started to learn how to play golf last year because
Good for
it's
you.
such, I mean, there's a lot of business that happens on the golf course. And so I thought this is a great skill that I can start applying. And one of the things that I found so fascinating about the sport is how much it's mental versus, physical, and how much just the slightest tweak of like one muscle can make a huge impact in your swing and reaching your goals. It feels like, from listening to you, and just for the reader or listeners benefit, we just met, so we're learning together. But it feels like you've always had a really good handle on mindset and how your thoughts and can, develop your reality. How did you develop that sort of mindset? And do you think that your success in golf is helping you today, or that you would have had that success regardless?
Great question. I guess it was my mother. I call her mother, Donna Jo. And, she taught me a lot about visualization on the golf course. She put a golf club in my hand at 6 years old. And I remember her, taking me around, and my dad was there. My dad wasn't really that great of a teacher, but my mother would encourage me to just create. And I was never left alone. I was not one of those country club kids that was dropped off and said, have a good time. When I was playing golf as a child, I was only playing with my parents. Or I was playing with my parents and their friends. And on Thursdays at Oak Forest Country Club in Longview, Texas, it was Ladies' Day, and I would go and I would sit in the golf cart. And the only thing that I could do was watch and rake the sand traps. And I just sat there, didn't say a word. But I just kind of, there was this intuitiveness that I had. And it may, it may have been, from my grandparents. My great uncle Jack, put me on a horse, and just, being able to feel the energy. And, I was in corrals with 1,000-pound, cattle and bulls and heifers, and weaning and vaccinating and all that at a very young age. So you have this, if you're not in tune with your surroundings, then, you could get killed. So I just had this kind of, I don't know if it was innate, I don't know if I was born with it, but I just, I was thrown into activity at a very, very early age. And, Jack Nicklaus was a great inspiration to me because, he was really the only person that they were ever watching on television. And, listening to him talk about how he used his hands, and then, watching interviews of him, walking around the golf course and talking about intuition and creativity. Seve Ballesteros was another one, how he would tell the interviewer or the reporter how he saw the shot about to happen before he actually pulled the trigger and made the shot happen. And, later on, I was told I was right in that in that mindset.
And isn't that such an
And
interesting parallel?
I'll have to tell you this. I'm an only child from 6 generations of Texans. My dad was an only child. He had really 5 sets of parents. His dad was exiled. His mother died giving birth to him. So I have kind of this generational trauma to where he was very protective and very sheltered. And then when I was born, my mother was not going to have that happen. So I was allowed to experiment and to gain experience, doing wild stuff, just being able to just go and try and see and fail.
And learning that it's okay to fail.
Yeah. And, my mother taught me at a very early age, you can do anything you want to do. Anything. Just as long as it's legal.
Yeah. Not that you can't get caught, just make it legal. That you don't have to worry about getting caught.
Right. And then getting into the financial services arena at such an early age, 23 years old, in personality tests, Myers-Briggs and DISC assessments and, all the things. My favorite right now is the Colby 8 index, and then Enneagrams and all the things. And all of those tools reinforced my belief that I'm on the right track. I'm doing the right things.
Well, and I was going to say earlier that I feel like it's an interesting parallel that as I'm thinking about it while you're speaking, that it seems so obvious, but I never really connected the dots before. But there's so much there where, as we started this, the financial literacy isn't taught. And also listening to our intuition and being able to sort of tap into the energy of things isn't taught. I grew up thinking I was weird because I could just know things, right? And people would just always be like, oh, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. And it was like, I mean, yeah, I guess it could be luck, but, I really just believed it and knew things would happen. So I feel like both of those areas, there's definitely seems to be a connection of how those things are not talked about, or if they are, it's in a negative capacity. Why do you think that is?
And, I think meditation should be taught. I think journaling should be taught. I think nutrition should be taught. People should, children should be taught how the banking and Federal Reserve system works. One of the first things that I do with a client is I sit them down and I say, how did you buy your house? Well, we put 20% down. And, let's just say that the house was $200,000. Well, that's $40,000. And I said, so if you put down $40,000, where does the other $160,000 come from? And they're like, well, it comes from the bank. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. It came, you just created $400,000 of loanable, financeable credits in the bank with your $40,000. Your $40,000 created the money to buy your own house. And they're like, what? And so, just the fiat system, $1 that is deposited into a bank, they can loan it out 10 times. Just that little conversation, that little lesson should be taught in school.
Right. Because I'm sure you get a lot of deer in the headlights, mind blown sort of looks when you say that.
Yeah. And then, and that's during the assessment. Not everybody gets to become a client, and I'm not everybody's financial advisor or financial professional. And there's a lot of, I guess associative, financial trauma before in their life when, they don't even believe what I'm saying. And it's like, okay, well, it is.
When you get to that point in your journey, I'll be ready for you, or you'll be ready for me. We can work together then.
Well, I don't believe that. Okay. You don't have to.
There's a million others that are ready for you.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's interesting because, you seem like a very much more of a right brain thinker
Mhm.
than um, any financial person I've ever met has always been a left brain thinker. It's always been
Yeah.
very analytical, very logical in the approach. But I love that this is a different way to think about money.
Good. Good. I try.
Well, you're succeeding.
I try hard.
Brandi Jo, this has been so great and so insightful. And I think so many business owners can utilize this conversation as a great leaping off point of how to think about money differently and how it can impact them, their business, their family in a more positive way. And, that always affects the community as well. What is the best way for someone to reach out to you to start working with you?
Um, my email address is quite unique. Sometimes it doesn't even work in some email clients. bjn@brandyjo.money. And they can go to my website, which is my full name, brandyjonewman.com, and it's Brandy with an I.
Excellent. Well,
I'm
I will
out.
have that in all of the show notes to make it
Good.
easy for all the
Good.
listeners,
And
but I
and
wanted
all
to make sure I gave you that opportunity.
excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm everywhere. All people have to do is Google me and I show up.
Make it easy, right?
Yep.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you would like to share before we wrap up?
I would talking about the business owners out there. What I've noticed in my consulting with business owners, because I kind of have two sides of the coin covered. I've got personal finance, families, individuals that are wanting to grow their money and leverage it and get into business. And then there's the business owners themselves that I consult on to kind of open their eyes to relationship building, marketing, hiring the right people, but also hiring the right people and then giving them more skin in the game, not making them equity partners by any means, but having them be a part of the not only the increase in revenue, but to reward them as well. And they'll get better employees and they'll get better support out of that.
100%. I love talking about culture as well. Maybe we'll have to have you on again and go
Yeah.
at it from that angle.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because they can have ownership without actual ownership.
Yeah. Yeah.
The sense of ownership can be enough.
Exactly. And it's just skin in the game. That's all it is. Instead of just looking at it like a job, they can look at it like they're part of something bigger.
Which is what we all desire at the end of the day.
Thank you, Catryn.
Thank you, Brandi Jo. Yes, ma'am, you got it correct. Good job. Well, thank you, Brandi Jo, for being here. Thank you, listeners, for staying with us. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like and subscribe to this podcast and share with your network. And we look forward to sending more wonderful guests like this. Until next time.